second of the series of webinars that we are conducting in memory of KP Sasi. I will give a brief introduction to KP Sasi if any of the participants are not aware about cartoonist, activist, and he was also a associated to countercurrent. He was many things. He was a phenomenal person, who always stood up for the marginalized and gave voice to the marginalized people, the voice of the voiceless. He was such a man. He passed away on December 25, Christmas Day, 2022. Shashi was an atheist, but he was, he always stood up for people's right to believe in religion. If you look at the last two films he did, one film called Fabricated, it was, even though it was, based upon the fabricated cases thrust upon innocent people around India, it was the main protagonist of the documentary was Abdul Nasser Madani, a Muslim cleric from Kerala. And also his second and the last major work was on the Kandhamal program of that happened in Odisha. He worked for 7-8 years to complete the documentary. I know the kind of struggle he went through to make that film. Even though he was a atheist, as I said, he stood up for the people's rights to believe in religion. And also, whenever we were talking, he would talk about spirituality, the need of spirituality. I didn't fully get him what he meant by spirituality. That is what we will be exploring today. The spirituality and religion in time of fascism. And I think it will give a lot of clarity to many people, especially activists who are non-religious, atheists, agnostics, and also Shashi's major work, the Gaon Chodab Nahi, that was a viral video before even before the word viral was invented. It had millions of views. It has become the anthem of the Adivasis around India. He was, that music video was speaking about the spirituality of Adivasis, Jal Jangal Samin, the right for Jal Jangal Samin. So he was, went into the spiritual aspect of, people who are out of the organized religions also. So we are exploring this concept of religion and spirituality in this meeting. All three panelists that we have here are excellent in their own field. I welcome Father Cedric Prakash, Dr. S. Faizi, who is an eminent ecologist, and Professor Dilip Simeon, who is an academician and author. I welcome three of the panelists and all the participants in this webinar. I hand it over to Satyasagar, who is a senior journalist and associate editor of countercurrents.org, and also a public health activist. Over to you, Satya. He will be moderating this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Binu. Welcome to the panelists and audience to the second KP Shashi webinar. Good evening to all of you. As Binu has mentioned, and all of you have already know that the theme of the webinar is religion and spirituality in the age of fascism. it's a very abstract and very big subject. I'm not sure we will find resolution here in today's webinar, but this is just the beginning of a discussion, I would say. And I'm also sure that everyone in the audience would have their own definitions of not just religion and spirituality, but also fascism. There are many definitions, and we will not be able to resolve all these definitions or bring about a consensus perhaps here, because the time will also be short. We will have more discussions in future. But the reason for choosing such an abstract theme was partly because it is a theme of great contemporary significance in the times we live in. And another reason was that, as Binu mentioned, Shashi was a living example of someone who was not religious, at least not explicitly religious or maybe even openly atheist, but undoubtedly very spiritual, very deeply spiritual in everything that he did or represented. We at Countercurrents thought that there was a need to spark a debate on the subject, because we live in a time when religion or religious identity or affiliation has been weaponized to a degree that nothing escapes scrutiny without a religious lens being put to it. Forget about humans. As Javed Jafri, the actor, said a few years ago, this is in Urdu, नफरतों का असर देखो, जानवरों का बंटवारा हो गया, गाय हिंदू हो गई और बकरा मुसलमान हो गया. Look at the time of hatred we live in, that even the animals have been divided. The cow has become Hindu and the goat has been designated Muslim. And there are so many other things that have also been divided, non-human things. So this is the lens of religion or organized religion that has been weaponized in our times. Sportsmen and women, actors, singers, artists, saints, everyone has a religious label associated with them now. They cannot be just plain humans anymore without labels designed, manufactured, and certified by cynical people on all sides of these artificial divides. A lot of this, of course, has to do with the phenomena of political parties in an electoral democracy. In particular, the current ruling party, using religion as a tool to mobilize voters, divide them, divert attention from its failures, and draw free credit from the faith of ordinary Indians, of Hindus, to be more to the point. While India is still a secular republic as per the constitution, in practice, the ruling regime has bulldozed all secular traditions and institutions to reshape India into its dystopia of a Hindu Rashtra. I don't know what is a Hindu Rashtra. We're finding out every morning.
Walking along the shore, he had called Peter and the other first disciples to be like him, fishers of men.
Can I request everybody
now after the resurrection?
Maxim, please, William.
Thank you. However, for all this religiosity and this uber religious atmosphere all around us today, there is something that seems to be missing completely in almost all walks of life, at least in India. And that is, what is missing is spirituality. For very long, spirituality has been clubbed together with religion to the point that religious institutions can be said to be in the business of marketing spirituality. In fact, taking advantage of the millennia-old urge of ordinary humans to gravitate towards the spiritual. The question here, in terms of definitions, as I said, everybody has their own definition of spirituality. But here, the definition that we would like to put to the panelists and the audience is that the spiritual here is broadly anything that is more than just the satisfaction of one's material needs and desires. It could be the poet searching for the right words to describe beauty, a scientist in the quest for truth, or a communist or social activist fighting for justice, or just the humility and simple grace with which indigenous people live on Mother Earth. As religious institutions and religiosity get weaponized in the service of fascist projects, today's webinar is meant to reimagine the idea of spirituality, to challenge the monopoly that religions or anyone wants to claim over the very concept. Can we liberate spirituality from its role as a pawn manipulated by the pseudo-religious? I say pseudo-religious because most of those, or many of those, who claim to be religious in a very public way are in fact not very true to their own professed beliefs, being far more interested in real estate than the values of whatever religion they claim to follow or propagate. Just as academic degrees do not guarantee knowledge and wisdom, hospitals don't provide health anymore, or the news media spews out lies all the time. Unfortunately, religious institutions have become home to everything except spirituality. So the question before us is, this is a generalization. I'll ask your forgiveness if I'm overstating my case, but it's deliberately provocative for everybody to think a bit more about it. The question before us is, how do we participate in religious activities in order to reclaim its potential for spirituality? Whether we like it or not, religion also occupies a huge space in social, economic, and political lives of ordinary citizens. Is religion too important to be left to the pseudo-religious? Can the spirituality that gave birth to great religions be restored to the institutions that govern them today? Or is this a completely impossible task? And lastly, can fascism be fought without a new spiritual awakening of some kind, whether religious or non-religious? With this, I would like to invite our first speaker, Father Cedric Prakash, who is a prominent Jesuit priest, human rights activist, and social worker, known for his tireless advocacy on behalf of marginalized communities in India and abroad. He's based in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and has dedicated his life to promoting peace, justice, and interfaith harmony. He's been particularly vocal about the plight of religious minorities, especially Christians and Muslims, and has consistently spoken out against discrimination, injustice, and the rise of religious fundamentalism. Father Cedric Prakash, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Satya. Thank you, Binu, Matthew, and all at Countercurrents for having this webinar in honor of our great friend, in a way, our mentor, our guide, KP Sasi. What I know of KP Sasi are three things. One is he had his heart where it matters most, with the poor, with the marginalized, and with all those who are excluded and exploited in society. Secondly, he used his capacity, his talents as a filmmaker to highlight reality, whether it is the Narbada Dam, whether it is the plight of Kanmahal, the victims there. The films he made brought a voice to the voiceless. And that is, I think, very important for us as we honor him and pay tribute. And the third, and I think very important thing is that he was a deeply spiritual man. As Satya has said earlier, and Bino also referred, he might not have been in that sense of the word religious. He was certainly not a priest like I am, but I mean, God will not ask you which religion you belong to. God will not ask you whether you have been a priest of this faith or this cult, or for that matter, this ideology. The only thing you will be asked, perhaps after we have finished our life on earth, is whether we have been a spiritual person. And when on the 25th of December 2022, our dear friend, a great friend to all of us, KP Sasi, went beyond the materiality of this world, it was significant for a person like me. It was Christmas Day, the day we believe that Jesus was born. And I certainly believe that on the 25th of December, Christmas Day, KP Sasi was born into a new life. And today, his gifts to each one of us, his heritage, his legacy remains in us as a person of deep spirituality, a person who had the courage of convictions. Today's topic, my dear friends, is about spirituality and religion in this age of fascism. One of the persons I've quoted a lot in my talks and in my seminars is this great, you call him a social analyst, you call him an academic, whatever it is, Lawrence Britt, who put together in 2003 14 characteristics of fascism. It was published, and he has written widely about fascism in different parts of the world. And at that time, he was analyzing certain fascist states. Hitler's Germany, the Mussolini's Italy, from where fascism was ultimately derived, the Spain of Franco, the Indonesia of Suharto, and the Chile of Pinochet. And when you arrived at these 14 characteristics, which actually are existent in our country today, all 14 of them, he highlighted one very, very important characteristic, and that I think I need to highlight in the context of today's webinar. And that characteristics is very, very clearly, he speaks about religion and government are intertwined. And I think we need to realize this, how religion and government are intertwined. And this is what Lawrence Britt says. Governments in fascist nations tend to use the most common religion in the nation as a tool to manipulate public opinion. Religious rhetoric and terminology is common from government leaders, even when the major tenets of the religion are diametrically opposed to the government's policies. And today we have to look, I would like to look particularly at India. We can definitely legitimize that this type of fascism exists in several other countries in the world. I have no doubt, and I don't want to get into an argument in this. But I live in India, and I just spoke to a huge group of about 350 young men and women here in Loyola College, Chennai, from all parts of India, on this whole idea of what is happening in the country today. I think we need to look at, first of all, Article 25. Article 25 of our constitutions, which the great women and men of our Constituent Assembly gave our country on the 26th of November 1949, very clearly states that the Constitution guarantees freedom of conscience and the right to freely profess, practice, and propagate religion, subject to certain limitations. This fundamental right ensures that the individuals have the freedom to choose and practice their religion without interference, provided it does not violate public order, morality, health, or other fundamental rights. Now, the courts, even recently one of the high courts said that this Article 25 of the Constitution does not give anyone the right to forcibly convert other. Now, this right is not talking about conversion. This right is talking about whether I, as an independent citizen of India, I'm an adult, I'm above the age of 18, whether I have the freedom to choose to accept the religion of my choice, or for that matter, stop believing in any God. Do I have a right to be an atheist? Do I have a right to be agnostic? One of the things that took place on the 26th of March, 2003, is what a good friend of mine, Harin Pandya, who testified before the Citizens Tribunal, was killed in Ahmedabad. We know he was not shot there. He was killed previously and so on. His body was found on the 26th of March, 2003. On that very day, the Gujarat government under the leadership, so-called leadership of the current Prime Minister of India, unanimously passed the Freedom of Religion Law 2003. And the opposition, the Congress and so on, had walked out. They were not part of that decision-making process, but it became law. Now it took full 5 years till 2008 for that government to frame the rules that are necessary to govern the implementation of the law. So after that, through our great friend Girish Patel, we challenged it in the Gujarat High Court. We were a bunch of citizens. There were Christians, there were Buddhists, there were Hindus, there were Muslims who contested the constitutional validity of that law. Now, here the law states, anyone who wants to change his or her religion needs the permission of the civil authority. So I phoned up the civil authority, was a friend of mine at that time, and I said, till now I was believing in Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ as my God. And now, just before talking to you, I've decided that there is no God. I'm an atheist. Now, who are you to tell me that I cannot change my religion? Don't tell me that atheism is an ideology. Atheism, as much as a religion or agnosticism, has Christianity or Islam or Hinduism or whatever it is. It is a belief. It is faith. So the point is, when we challenged it for years, the government could not respond. Then we withdrew our petition. And then even now, the whole question is in a kind of a limbo, because very clearly the government does not know how to deal with it. The freedom of religion laws, the anti-conversion laws of several states which have come, and BJP ruled states, are there in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not calling a full bench and so on. There are three things which I want to say in the context of these laws, which is, who is the state to decide? I'm not speaking here as a priest. I'm not speaking as a Christian. I'm speaking as a citizen of India. Who is the state to decide what religion I accept? My friend Bino Matthews in Kerala, and when some of the top people of the Christian church in Kerala have used the words love jihad, I protested against it. I said, if a girl is above 18, even if she's Christian, if she's born and brought up as a Christian, she has a right to even elope or fall in love with a Muslim man. Don't use these very unconstitutional and derogative terms, okay, which is called love jihad. I think as Christians, we have to look at what type of formation are we giving that young girl who's at the age of 18 or 19 wants to elope with a Muslim. For me, she has a right to do it. The point is, who's the state to decide on what religion I choose? The second point is, there is things like force and allurement that is used in the Gujarat government's act and so on. So the allurement could be any kind of enticement. If I can tell you, it is clearly written, material or any other. If I tell you that if you believe in my religion, you will have a sense of freedom, you will have a sense of equality, can that be termed as allurement? Because equality is there in the preamble of the Constitution of India. It's a fundamental right of every citizen. If I say you will become as equal as me and perhaps more than the less equality you face, how can the government decide, or how can a court decide that that is allurement, which is a fundamental right of the Constitution? And the third thing is I think, which is important for us to look at every stage of life, is what do you mean by my freedom to preach, practice, and propagate my religion? It's not about Christianity. It's not about Islam. If there is a group in Ahmedabad, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, who go about singing and chanting Hare Rama and Krishna, do they have the legitimate right to do it? If there is a group of young men outside my institution who want to distribute tracts of Jehovah's Witness, do they have the right to do it or not? And can because in Christianity, we are not merely speaking about the articulation, the propagation of a religion, but we use it as a witnessing dimension. So if somebody accepts Christianity, or for that matter, any other religion, because of the witness factor one has experienced, is that in any way allurement or force? There are many things, but this is a matter of debate. And today, fascists all over the world, as I've said in Lawrence Britt's, is one of the 14 characteristics of fascism, is conveniently used by fascist regimes and also in our country to manipulate and create a sense of majoritarianism against minority communities. It's happening here. Does a person of one religion have the right to marry the person of another religion? Why should there be courts who need to decide it? If two people are in love with each other, if two people very clearly say that I am in love with each other, and I know many, many people all across the world who have excellent mixed marriages. Some go to church, some go to temple, some go to mosque, some don't do anything. The spouse stands outside, maybe the place of worship. Now I come to the second part of my sharing. Is one thing is religion and religiosity, the other is spirituality. A lot of religion, a lot of rules and regulation, the do's and don'ts, the prescriptions are man-made, or for that matter, woman-made. These are not made by God. Any God gives us faith, gives us spirituality. The spirituality, I think, should be embodied in 3 or 4 key things, which Pope Francis has been speaking consistently. And when he said very clearly some time ago, sometime last year, that I think it was in Indonesia, when he said that all roads lead to God. Certainly, from Vatican II, from the early 60s, the Catholic Church and most of Christianity is definitely saying that all roads lead to God. It doesn't matter who you are. If you embrace Christianity, that's another thing. So how do we ensure that what we have in our day-to-day dealing with one another is a faith experience, is a spiritual experience, which KP Sasi so beautifully embodied and manifested both in his life and in his great testimony through the powerful films he made. My final point before I wind up and give others a chance of speaking is that how do we, as men and women of goodwill, I'm presuming there are 80 plus people who are here at the webinar, and perhaps others will join, are men and women of goodwill. I know some of them very, very closely. I know some of you very, very closely, and excellent human beings who have transcended the narrow confines of religion, who have gone beyond the prescriptions. But how do we create these synergies when we realize that someday, when a Muslim is being demonized, denigrated because of what he eats, as Satya referred, the goat has become Muslim and the cow has become Hindu. So I think it is a very powerful technique of fascists to keep us divided in the name of religion. So how do we transcend? So spirituality and faith. My faith tells me that I'm called to inclusiveness. I don't create walls. I build bridges. I don't discriminate of people. I was born and brought up in a building in Baikala in Bombay. And there we had Hindus and Muslims. And there we prayed together, we played together, we fought with each other together. So it didn't matter whether one was going for the namaz or one was being there for the aarti of someone, or one was saying the rosary at home. We all joined in. And the school I came from, we had people from every religion, including several Parsis. And just before the examinations, all the boys and girls used to go and pray to St. Anthony, because somebody told us when we were small You pray to St. Anthony, so even if you don't study, you will pass the exams because he is the patron of hopeless cases. So that was a time when we had syncretic religion, where synergies created, we have brought us together, when we fought with each other as boys against boys and not against. Today I've seen in the school I come from, I'm in Ahmedabad, today when they play chore police, you know, the boys that are being beaten up, even they're all Hindus, are supposed to be terrorists. Who creates this narrative? Who demonizes the other? Who creates for us a place, when they weaponize religion, to use religion, as we see in Pelgam, we still do not know the truth of Pelgam. The government has refused. And all of us are, many of us are clapping hands, not in this group, I suppose, to say that this is, and innocent people who have said, don't attack the Kashmiris, don't attack the Muslims, have sedition cases filed on them. Even professors from colleges who have taken a stand and asked questions. So before I end, I want to say, in the name of KP Sasi, who has brought us spirituality, who has helped us deepen our faith, who has brought us together, not merely for this webinar, but hundreds and thousands of people, I want to appeal to each one of you, my dear sisters and brothers. Let's have spirituality. Let's have faith. Let's transcend the narrow confines of our own religions. Let's create synergies and realize we are sisters and brothers. As we say in the Constitution, it is fraternity, hum sab ek hai. God bless you all. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you on behalf of my beloved friend and our friend, KP Sasi. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father Cedric Prakash, for a very illuminating lecture on the subject of today's discussion. A few questions before we go on to not a question I'm asking you, but the question to ponder over is, what exactly is a religion? And as you said, people should be, as per the Constitution and even in terms of common sense, people should be free to practice whatever gives them spiritual benefit of some kind. And there cannot be any prescription. And again, one of the things that we would really like to explore as part of this series of discussions is what exactly constitutes a religion? Because today, these big buckets called Hinduism or Islam or Christianity, they seem to be like an umbrella under which there are hundreds of small faiths that are subsumed. So the big name like Hinduism or any other religion actually subsumes and takes over all the small, autonomous, independent, decentralized spiritualities. In the case of the indigenous people, for example, in India, they've been arguing that they're not Hindus. They would like to be recognized as per their own religion, the Sarna religion in Jharkhand. The question arises, who defines religion, and why are we handing over the little faiths of ordinary people to this big, almost like a multinational corporate empire, which then runs franchisees all over the place by saying that you are qualified to be Hindu or you are qualified to be Christian. And the government obviously comes in because the role of the government in some ways to regulate business. And it is quite logical that it regulates religion, because religion in many forms in the current age we live in has become a big business. So that's a debate for probably the next. I'd like to invite Dr. Faizi, who's a renowned Indian environmentalist, biodiversity expert, and activist, known for his influential role in global environmental negotiations and conservation efforts. A champion of environmental justice and indigenous rights in particular, Dr. Faizi has consistently advocated for national sovereignty over natural resources, equitable access to technology, and the recognition of ecocide as a global crime. His work spans from grassroots activism in Kerala to advising governments and working with UNESCO, the IUCN, and UNEP. Dr. Faizi, you're welcome to present your views to the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Satya. Thank you, Binu. Greetings to my distinguished fellow speakers, Father Cedric Prakash and Professor Dilip Simeon. Shashi, I used to know him through his films and writings, and also through common friends. One of his close comrades was also a close friend of mine. He also passed away quite early. Sharat Chandran. They had together made also a few films. I only met Shashi once, and his spirit and also his creativity and the sense of justice that he upheld were remarkable. But when Binu invited me to speak on spirituality, actually I was embarrassed. I'm the last person to speak on spirituality. And then he said, okay, I can speak about the indigenous people, the Adivasi communities. Now, speaking about spirituality, I also believe in a certain spirituality, which as a person studying wildlife and birds, I derive that spirituality from the from the animal world. Not in the sense of people killing others for having the animal food, but in the sense of learning from the animal world that they don't rape. Animals usually don't rape. They have a exquisite courtship displays to attract the opposite, and they don't conduct wars, and they don't kill another animal just because they don't like it. They do also have competition and occasionally fights, but they have their own ways of settling without actually going to kill. And animals also kill. They kill for their food. When a tiger kills a deer, it says just like I eat a mango. And when it had its food, it doesn't kill anymore. It cannot. Also because it knows that if it keeps killing, it doesn't have food a few days later or a few years later. So that is a great sense of spirituality. And also the industrial man in the past less than 200 years, we have moved far from our natural ways of life in many ways. Even our circadian rhythm, the daily rhythm, has also changed. Now it's 7 o'clock and I'm using the light, which is actually artificial light. And our day length, our circadian rhythm, depending on the daylight, ends when the sun ends. So if we are overstaying, that is disrupting, that has already disrupted for a few generations now, our circadian rhythm. And I'm sitting on a chair now talking to you. in nature, we never had a chair in the natural way of life, in the sense that we were evolved to either walk or lie down or sit on the ground or run. But when we use the chair, it also disrupts our natural postures, and therefore it brings you different kinds of bone-related problems, which the doctors normally would not tell you, because they are not trained on, they are not tuned to do that. I was the president of the Ethological Society of India for 3 years. That is where, you know, we have scientists studying animal behavior, and the behavioral changes due to changes in the light patterns. But nobody has ever done a study on the impact of light on humans, the historical trajectory of the changes in the use of artificial life in the life of humans. So those kind of things, and also I see inspiration in the fact that the indigenous society spread around the world. They will be the one that are going to survive when one day the industrial society or the industrial revolution will perish. It will perish for the reasons like climate change. Climate change at certain point will make life unbearable for the human species on the earth. And then the inclusive physiological fitness of humans are constantly reducing. We are not an autonomous species any longer, because we need constant support of the medical system to survive as a species. We are no longer an autonomous entity, biological entity. So all those, of course, then the struggles and the central feature of injustice that rules the world today, both for the global system and the national domestic system, that will all lead us to a point where the industrial civilization will perish. And then all the earth will be left from our species, people who have been living far away from the reach of technology. Those are the indigenous people. So humans will not become extinct in the near future as a species, but the industrial man will perish. Now, our own indigenous people, the Adivasi people, actually, I don't speak for Adivasis. They have to speak for themselves, but I'm sharing you something that I've learned from them. They are the world's largest population of indigenous people, but seldom recognized as such. We can translate the very term indigenous people into Adivasis. Adivasi in all Indian languages means the first people. Even there was a Supreme Court judgment in which it has very categorically said that Adivasis are the original inhabitants of India, Justice Kajju. But the Indian state or parts of the Indian states has a confusion whether to call them. It's not a confusion, it's actually a fear. Those elements, they don't want to call Adivasis, or to refer to them, the indigenous people, because they fear that if Adivasis are called indigenous people or Adivasis as such, then we, the elites or are outsiders. So Adivasi is a politically powerful term which they fear, and they understand its meaning very clearly. And that's why they use the word Vanavasi. But during the time when Mrs. Meera Kumari was the chair of the Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha, she observed the International Day of Indigenous People in the Parliament, the only time it happened. And she had very categorically mentioned Adivasis as the indigenous people, and went on describing their role in the building of the country and their traditions and all that. But the Indian government, I'm involved in the Biodiversity Convention, and where indigenous people have a very prominent role. In one of the negotiations where this term was discussed, India raised an objection along with Canada and no other country. India was opposed to the term indigenous people itself being accepted in the CBD, the Biodiversity Convention. And later on in another meeting of the same committee, somebody questioned the Indian delegation about it. And then the Indian delegate, he was a principal secretary from the Ministry of Environment, who was also a co-chair of that meeting. He was saying, no, we don't hold that. Indian government doesn't hold that position. It was only that particular person from India representing the country at that meeting who was opposing. Now we no longer oppose. So it's the parliament, they have no courage to make, refuse to use the term the indigenous people or Adivasi in the parliament, in the political platforms, but they use it in very clever ways, undermining its power. So Adivasis, we treat them as a defeated people. They are actually defeated people, as the people from the Dravidian stock from the Indus Valley civilization pushed to the forest and so on. And also the early arrivals in India, the whole continent's name itself is derived from one tribe's name, Gond, the Gondwana land. So actually, before the name Bharat, India, and so on, we had the name Gondwana land for the place of South Asia. But those people have been fighting. They have been fighting the colonial regime. But those fights, those wars were largely ignored by the mainstream historians. We talk about 1857, but even before 1857, there were wars in the Dehradun region, mainly triggered by the appropriation of the forests, their homes, by the colonial regime, and they were fighting. And there were such fights across the country. 104 such wars were recorded, but they are not obviously very popular. Adivasis had to write their own history, and we should be promoting that. But now, although we treat them as a defeated people, 3 crores of them have been displaced since independence, sometimes in the name of conservation, other times in the name of development. But in 2006, the country created a landmark legislation, the Forest Rights Act, which for the first time ever in the history of our country, recognize the historical injustice committed to the Adivasi communities and recognize their rights on the forest land of the country. So the country's forests will be best managed in the hands of the forest, the Adivasi communities, and not in the hands of the forest bureaucracy, which is a huge burden on the country. I think I'm coming to the end of my time. So, but just one caution I want to say is, the term is spirituality is misappropriated to replace the idea of religion, the institution of religion, and so on, even outside. Some of these fascist group, they come to international meetings, even UN platforms. They come representing the spiritual movement or spiritual organization or spiritual gurus and so on. So they go to UNESCO, they get sometimes red carpet welcome with the aid of diplomats from our country. That is one of the major jobs our diplomats do outside missions. And they also flourish. Their establishments, their religious establishments outside, paving the way for fascist ideas and organizations to flourish in those places. So one has to be therefore also careful about the manner in which the very term spirituality is also misused. So with those few words, do I have more time? Binu told me it's 20 minutes.
No, you can take another 5 minutes.
Okay. So the Adivasi people have also their own spiritual systems, like the Sarna faith. The chief minister of Soren, Chief Minister Soren, he was asking to have Sarna religion, Sarna faith recognized as a religion, and the assembly had also passed a resolution about it. And I think from that day, he became a target of central agencies. And also the Gond people and their religion of Boya Puna, which means the way of nature. And in Attapadi of Kerala, the Adivasi heartland of Kerala, they also have a faith system. It's not a system, of course, a worldview. They call it Pasad. Pasad is an idea of God that they have. The God doesn't have shape or forms or anything, but they pray to that concept of Pasad. Now, these multiple ideas of spirituality, of worshipping nature and its different forms, the rivers, the mountains, animals, and so on, have been progressively subsumed into the main religion, and those identities have been tampered with. So that has to stop. The Adivasi communities, their way of life, their cultural heritage, their own spiritual or their own worldview have to be protected. And we have enough laws. SC/ST Atrocities Act, the PESA, and so on. But none of these is implemented on the ground. That doesn't happen because the bureaucracy always implement the implementation of this. The good thing about the indigenous peoples, I'm not a believer, and I used to be, I am still an active atheist. But one system of spirituality that I admire and I can accept is the Adivasi worldview. They have not conducted wars. They are not hostiles to other communities. They believe in sharing. When they hunt a deer, they share that with the whole community. And they feel a kinship with the animals, the birds, and so on. They live in the rhythm of the nature. They don't disrupt the rhythm of the nature. And it is those people that our government, our forest department is treating as encroachers and enemies of conservation. That is the greatest disservice to conservation that is happening. It's a disservice not only to conservation and a massive violation of the fundamental rights of the Adivasi people. That has to change. When Adivasi culture, their worldview come to rule us, to rule our mainstream society, India will be a much beautiful place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Faizi, for a very deep kind of take on the spirituality of the indigenous populations of India and indeed around the world, and how these invisibilized people and their faith and their worldview has never been taken into account. As you said, they are the defeated people. And this goes back to the question that we are trying to explore, that when we say religion or spirituality, the question is, whose religion? Who has patented this religion? Who certifies that something is spiritual and something is not spiritual? And you've also expanded the meaning of religion to go beyond the anthropomorphic, the human-centric, to the world of nature, of animals, And I know different religions have different belief systems about the relation between humans and nature. But the indigenous people have a very unique viewpoint, which is primarily that we are all part of children of Mother Nature. So that's a different take on the subject altogether. Animals do figure in other religions also, even as gods, or animal symbols are used. But there are not many examples of gods created with animal totems or animal figures actually coming to the rescue of animals. They're always meant for human beings. Anyway, that's a different subject. It actually calls into question terms like religion itself. What do we really mean by religion? What do we mean by spirituality? Who is monopolizing these terms? Who defines them? Can we throw these terms open to much greater contestation than what they are right now? Because people constantly talk about religion and interreligious problems. It's called communalism in India, and so on and so forth. But we need to go beyond this. I think to explore the faith and spirituality of a much more decentralized nature that already exists, but which is invisibilized. I would like to invite Professor Dilip Simeon next to place his views on the subject. Professor Dilip is a prominent historian and writer based in New Delhi, known for his extensive contributions to the fields of labor history, social movements, and the intellectual history of modern India. He has combined academic rigor with deep commitment to public history and democratic activism. And beyond academia, Dr. Simeon is also very actively involved in civil society initiatives, often speaking out on issues related to democracy, secularism, and human rights. Welcome, Professor Simeon. Over to you.
Thank you, Satya. I hope I'm audible to everybody. If not, please tell me.
You are audible.
Okay, thank you very much for this invitation, Binu and Satya, and my regards to my fellow speakers, Cedric, whom I know, and Faizi, whom I've not met before. And good evening to all of you. This is a very weighty subject, and I was telling Satya just this morning, this is not sufficient time to discuss it, but maybe we are floating the matter, and we will carry on because we do need to discuss it in some detail. I've been engaged with this subject quite seriously since the 1984 violence in Delhi. And after that, I did a lot of work both on the streets and in terms of discussions about what it all means. I will try to sum up some of my views, and I know that they are amenable to a great deal more discussion. But I think first and foremost, we have not devoted sufficient intellectual rigor to this issue. We are all agreed that we all have human rights and that we have rights to our conscience and our beliefs, and there's an assault going on it, and we need to defend our democracy. We are all agreed on that, and that there are fascistic features to the political system, not only in our country, but in other countries. But I think the problem is much deeper than that. I think actually the time period, as a historian, I would say the time periods during which the human mind really flourished in a free manner and was not oppressed by various kinds of censorship, whether religious censorship or political censorship, were very few and far between. The moments in history where people actually had full freedom to think and work and articulate their beliefs have not been very many. We have to think about that. And even this is periods long before our modern period, when there was religious persecution. I've been studying the history of religion. I've begun to study it a little more seriously now. There won't be much time to go into it, but I'll relate a few things. To begin with, I think the central issue is that there is a deep-rooted common origin of both religion and philosophy, or let us say theology. Religion and theology, theology and philosophy have the same root. And the same root is a sense of wonder, or you can call it curiosity, a sense of wonder at where we came from, who are we, where are we going, what is time, what is eternity, is it limited, is it unlimited? Even now we find anthropomorphic language used by science journalists who talk about the ancient universe. And they talk about unlocking the secrets of the universe. It always makes me smile because although I am a complete duffer in science, I don't claim to know anything. But I do know that if you say ancient universe, you are attributing the human quality of being historical to something which is ahistorical. History transpires within eternity. Eternity is not subject to our concept of history. As a historian, it took me many decades to realize this. Everything is not historical. There are some things which are beyond history. So that's one issue, that there are serious philosophical issues. And if people talk about spirituality without being religious, then they are actually referring in a tangential way to something else. They're referring to the mystery of being. It's a mystery. So when religion, if I were to sum it up, I would say religion is a mystery pretending to be an explanation. Someone is speaking. I don't know if they're speaking to me or not, but anyway, so I'll carry on. So to begin with, I think there is a mystery, although the philosophy continues the debate and the dialogue, and theology then says you don't need to debate and dialogue. This is the difference. The origin is the same, a sense of wonder and curiosity about where we have come from and where we are going, and about time and eternity. But the theological position ultimately says we have the answer. You don't need to debate this any longer. There is a very wonderful citation by a philosopher whom I respect very much. He says that humanity has always been charmed by two opposite kinds of fascination. One is the charm of competence that is associated with mathematics and all the mathematical sciences. And the other is the charm of humble awe, which is associated with the religion and so on. And then he says, philosophy is the gentle but firm refusal to succumb to either kind of charm. In short, philosophy continues the conversation and dialogue, and theology puts an end to it. If theology were able to continue it, then it would be very interesting. That's point number one. The second point is that if there has been one outstanding philosophical issue through the ages, it can be summed up very simply. Should we live according to divine guidance or should we live according to human guidance? So this is the difference between political philosophy and political theology. Political theology says we must live according to the guidance of God, divine guidance. Political philosophy says we can devise our means of life and living based on unaided human reason. Now, this has also been summed up among philosophers as the dispute between Jerusalem and Athens. Athens signifying the Platonic, Socratic, ancient Greco-Roman tradition, and Jerusalem signifying what we might call the Abrahamic tradition. Abrahamic tradition, of course, as you know, implies prophetism, the arrival of prophets. And of course, Moses is supposed to be the first prophet, although there's no historical evidence for Moses, but there is historical evidence for Jesus Christ and Muhammad. We know they existed. Whether we believe in their divine inspiration, that is a matter for people to debate. But the point is, there was a prophetic tradition. So the prophetic tradition and the philosophical tradition then came into some kind of tension. And this tension has remained through the centuries. Should we live according to divine guidance or should we live according to human guidance? Now, if we are to live according to divine guidance, I'm trying here to address the topic of the seminar, okay? Whatever I've thought about it. If we are to live according to divine guidance, the prophetic tradition comes in the way. How does it come in the way? Because it says that suppose we have more than one prophet. If you have just one prophet, it's fine. The prophet is the person who has a glimpse of the light. All of us are living in darkness. The prophets have a glimpse of light. And the law-giving prophets are the prophets who are always standing in the light. Say Moses would be one such. Okay. And then Freud has a brilliant essay on how Moses was an Egyptian. And there's a very fascinating discussion, historical discussion by a very famous Egyptologist about this whole thing, about how ancient Egypt was the charmed universe. If Max Weber talked of the disenchanted world of modernity, then this historian talks of ancient Egypt as being the original enchanted world, but we won't go into that. The point is, the prophetic tradition, suppose you have more than one prophet. This is the problem. If you have more than one prophet, you are in the position of having to decide upon which prophet is correct and which prophet is not correct. This immediately puts us back in the sphere of philosophy. Strictly speaking, revelation, the prophets reveal truth. So there's revealed truth. It's in the Arabic, it's ilham. In Sanskrit, it's shruti. In English, it's revelation. But revelation is a form of knowledge. all the knowledge you need is written down. In the Bible, for instance, if you read the first chapter of the Bible, it says God created, God said, let there be light. The first question a philosopher will ask is, who is saying this? Who is reporting God as having said anything at all? So there are questions at a very mundane level that we can pose from a philosophical standpoint without necessarily wanting to blaspheme. But the element of blasphemy comes into the picture because revealed knowledge is a form of knowledge. Therefore, to discuss revealed knowledge as being true or false is itself blasphemy. The trouble is, if we are why is it blasphemy? Because we are subjecting the word of God and the will of God to human reason. So it's blasphemous. The trouble is that we can easily reply that God has given us the power to reason. So we can say, as Nietzsche did, that you see, God commanded us to find the truth, and we found there is no God. So there is a problem here, reason versus revelation. That's the second problem. The third problem is that when we are talking about religion and the conflict between different religions and all that, I think that we are missing one major point. We are living, you said, with the age of fascism. I'm saying something further than that. I say we are living in an age of ideology. We are living in an age of ideology. And the question is not of fascism, but of totalitarianism. And how totalitarianism is indeed connected to fascism, but then you find totalitarianism in the communist world also. You find Stalinism also. Few people will know that, for instance, Stalin in the Soviet Union voted for the foundation of Israel in 1948. So the point is that even in the communist world, there's totalitarianism, there's tyranny, there's violence, the subjugation of civic rights and rights to conscience, the subjugation of right to free speech, etc., etc. It's going on even in the name of leftism and communism, but we don't want to discuss it, those of us who are leftists. Okay, so the problem is totalitarianism, and totalitarianism is a novel form of tyranny. There was tyranny, there were individual dictators and tyrants, but totalitarianism is not the dictatorship of Stalin and Hitler or Mao. Totalitarianism is a dictatorship and tyranny of an ideology. The totalitarian doctrine will tell us what to eat, what to wear, whom to love, whom to befriend, how to live, how to walk, how to dress, how to clothe ourselves. They will tell us everything. In short, it's an overpowering of the human soul itself. So this is the difference between any kind of tyranny and the totalitarian tyranny, and which is flourishing today to various degrees. So I'm saying that what is happening is that religion has been overtaken by ideology. It appears to be religion, but for instance, let us just think, is Zionism the same as Judaism? No, it is not. Is Hinduism the same as Hindutva? No, it is not. Are the Christian evangelists and Christian fascists in Trump's USA, are they the same as any Christian? No, it is not. Christianity produced many liberation theologians and many democratic people who fought, and many of them are here also, who fought for the rights of the poor and for the democratic rights of ordinary people. But Christianity also produced dictators and tyrants like Franco and Salazar. Many of the dictators of Latin America were supported by the Catholic Church. In the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, the Catholic Church played a very tyrannical role. So you find that in every religious tradition, there is a distinction between those who stand for democracy and liberty and human rights and those who do not. Therefore, it's not a question of the religion. It's a far deeper issue. I mean, even if in Buddhism, you can find that there are, even in Sri Lanka or in Japan during the World War II or in Burma, you find people who are positively fascists and proto-tyrannical, then obviously even Buddhism can produce fascism. So we have to think about what is producing fascism without just going into the religious aspect of it. There's something more. That's something more, is that there has always been a link between the sacred and between violence. In fact, René Girard, the famous French anthropologist and sociologist, has written a book, very famous book called Violence and the Sacred, in which he examines the ancient Greco-Roman religious traditions also, and such concepts as bacchanalia and so on. And it's very, very interesting. We don't have time to go into that, but we really need a serious discussion about religious traditions and belief traditions without getting too excited about it. In India, it's very difficult to have a rational discussion about religion because everybody gets upset. Nobody wants to have if I'm saying something critical about some religion, it doesn't mean I'm against your religion or I'm belittling you. I'll give you one simple example. In Hindi, the word mithya means false and deceitful. You can translate it as chal kapat in Hindi. Chal, kapat, lies, falsehood. Mithya means something which is positively wrong and bad. In English, myth has a dual meaning. It can mean fiction, but it doesn't necessarily mean fiction. It simply refers to legends and stories, not necessarily having a bad or pejorative or negative connotation. So the trouble is, when the word myth is used, people who are Hindi speaking hear it in another way, and people who are knowledgeable about English hear it in another way. They say, oh, you are saying that Muhammad and Jesus were real people, but our gods are not real. They're all only myths. So this is how we need to be able to have a discussion about all this without getting excited. This is another point. So we have had religion has been overtaken by ideology. That's the point. Mahatma Gandhi used to say that this is not communalism is not religion. It's irreligion. He said it's irreligion. It's the opposite of religion. By which he meant that religion was being overtaken by something else. Now, often we find people saying we should not mix religion and politics. But after studying the Western philosophical tradition, I found that through the centuries, if all the greatest philosophical minds have said you can't separate them. And Gandhi also used to say that I don't believe religion should be separate from politics. It should infuse politics at every step. Now, if we think carefully about it, what is he actually saying? If we substitute the word religion with the word ethics, and if we substitute the word politics with the word power, then all he's saying that power should be exercised with due caution and regard to ethics and morality. Whereas in the Western tradition, political philosophical tradition, from Machiavelli and Hobbes and to the Jacobins and Lenin and Nietzsche, everybody was saying that in religion, in politics, you have to have the mixture of Caesar and Christ. You have to be cruel. You can't help it. That's it. Max Weber even wrote a whole essay on this in 1919. It's called Politics as a Vocation, in which he said politics is an alliance with the devil. If you enter politics, because politics means violence, if you enter into politics, you are allying with the devil. It's all very well for. So it's a very, very fascinating essay. So the point is that what has happened is that religion has been overtaken by ideology. And because state structures and power structures always require legitimation, they require legitimacy. Then gaining legitimacy through the sacred, because violence and the sacred are always together. You don't have, I mean, you cannot ban alcohol in the armed forces, and you cannot ban God either. God and alcohol are very close to violence. You see? That's because people need to need some kind of succor. All right. So my point is that we are living in an age of ideology. Moreover, we are living in an age of totalitarianism, which tends to take over the entire soul. It's not mere tyranny or despotism. It's more than that. It's an attempt to control the human soul in its entirety. Swallow up the human soul. Okay. It's a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream because human mind cannot be suppressed. But there's an assault on the mind. If you only look at Arnab Goswami television for about 5 minutes, you will understand what I mean. I don't need to explain to anybody what's an assault on the mind, because there is no conversation. We don't talk, we shout, we put labels, we scream, we dismiss, we sneer, but we don't talk. Talking means you hold yourself open to evidence and to rationality. But we are not holding ourselves open to evidence or rationality. We don't talk reasonably. These are all the results of what is happening. So it's not simply a matter of fascism. And spirituality means the common ground between philosophy and an open theology, in my mind, would be an openness to mystery. It's interesting, when Satya was introducing, he said that scientists and their pursuit of truth. The implication is that truth is something that only scientists do. I'm not criticizing you, I'm just pointing out a philosophical problem. This is a problem of our entire era. Truth was reduced to measurement. So truth, the pursuit of truth, or shall we say reasonable speech, was separated from virtue and beauty and truth and justice and so on. You must have heard this, that facts are sacred and opinion is free, which is another way of saying that facts are those which can be measured by science, and everything else which cannot be measured by science, it's all open for debate. That means values and facts are sharply separated. Okay, so we are left with nothing. Because the most important, Tolstoy made this statement and Max Weber repeated it in 1917. He said science is useless. Science is useless because it doesn't answer the most important questions that human beings face, which is, what should I do and how should I live? Now, if we can't understand this, he said science is useful only to the extent that if you frame the question properly, then maybe science can help you answer it. But otherwise, by itself, mathematics is ethically neutral. You can even be making atom bomb and say, I'm only a mathematician. I never did anything wrong. I just tightened the screws. I just made some mathematical calculation. So since mathematics and science are ethically neutral, then where do we get our ethics? We have to get it from somewhere. Now, if that somewhere is now itself divided and subdivided, then what are we going to end up with? A war of conscience against conscience. So my issue is that we need to actually reframe these. My problem is we need to reframe these. And the first step is to recognize that neither science nor religion can actually answer and get over the problem, which is an insuperable problem, that there is a mystery to human life which cannot be overcome. Don't pretend that by sending Hubble telescope and by looking at talking about the universe doesn't have any history. This is a very famous Chinese citation that the knowledge is like a balloon. The bigger it grows, the larger the area of your ignorance. The further you can look, the more you realize that you don't have a clue. You cannot dismiss eternity by reducing it to history. So, all right, I think I'm running out of time. I just wanted to pose these problems before you, and I'll stop now. And if you want to discuss it, I'm happy to discuss it.
Thank you very much, Dilip, for clarifying so many of the terms that we have used. And as I sort of indicated right at the beginning, the theme was very abstract and very open-ended in that sense, because everybody has their own definitions. And I think you have brought very rich kind of the historian's lens to this subject, and it's given a lot of clarity. And obviously, this is a subject which needs to be discussed much more, and hopefully we'll be able to organize more webinars along these lines with more clarity in future. And one of the things that you talked about was about the centrality of prophets to religions, but in the times we live in, it's not just profits, it's also profits. There's a big link between religion and economy. I mean, Jawaharlal Nehru was famous for saying that industries are the new temples of modern India. But we live in a period where temples are the industries of modern India.
Yeah, that's
So it's inverted it, stood it on its head. The point being that there is a big link between how religion is actually controlled, governed, institutionalized, and it's very closely linked to economy. In that sense, I would be very neutral to religion by looking at it as any other business. Why not? You're not pointing a gun to anybody's head and asking them to go to a church or a mosque or a temple. People are free to go and spend their money wherever they want. There's nothing wrong with it, except that it should be regulated like a business. And it should be actually treated as such also. And in fact, the conflict between these institutions is exactly a mirror of the conflict in the corporate world. If you have a competition between Walmart and Amazon, or between the Ambanis and the whoever else, over market share, and that's why all these debates come in, or these laws come in about conversion, because conversion is something that is seen as a threat to a dominant monopoly business. You're taking away customers from us. Literally, it's in those terms. So there is a very strong economic link, and I think that one more if I may ask you to, and also the other speakers, about the link between religion and economy, and religion as business. So can we see religion, institutionalized religion? I'm not talking about the aspect of mystery that you refer to, and the fact that mysteries will never go away, and also to the fact that everybody has a need for an ethical framework, and that will also never go away and should not go away also. But the link between institutionalized religion and business, and via business and as a business to politics, is what I think links many of the people here probably are also looking at the theme, and it connects it to fascism. Fascism is an ideology, and you sort of very correctly pointed out we live in an age of ideology. But the ideology of the most dominant ideology is that of making money, making profit.
No, I see. This is if I may just say, just for 2 minutes, incidentally, I have put a link. I gave a talk on Gandhi Jayanti last year. It's called the Oceanic Circle. I put a link on the chat board, so if anyone wants to see it, I put a lot about religion over there also. The point is that capitalism, you see, there is a very, very interesting tradition in political and philosophical thought. At the time of Immanuel Kant or even Adam Smith, they all thought that the growth of commerce will put an end to human conflict. Warfare was something which was pre-capitalist, and now with the emergence of the capitalist civilization, there would be an end to conflict because people would have a vested interest in making money and commerce and so on. So that would put in. Kant even wrote a famous essay called An Outline for Perpetual Peace. What has happened over the last 2 centuries is very clear. Capitalism thrives on, it's the opposite. Capitalism thrives on conflict and war. So it's a very complicated and long story, but there's an economic argument to be made, an economic historical argument to be made that actually capitalism arose as a consequence of warfare, and capitalism is a method of continuing a perpetual warfare. Okay, the arms industry is the largest industry, and the aeronautics industry, I mean, I don't need to give you, and you're all astute people, you're all aware people, you know what is happening in the world, whether in Palestine or anywhere else. Warfare is part of capitalism. My other issue is, philosophical issue is that we have to address the problem with prophetic tradition. There is a problem with religion. There is a problem which we have to discuss, and that is the appearance of the concept of the true religion. This one concept, true religion, has caused a lot of problems. I could say much more about it, I don't want to, but the point is that if you have one true religion, it implies immediately that the others are false religions. And it lays the ground for conflict. So it's just a riddle I want to place before you. I'll just stop in less than 30 seconds. In the classical ancient times, the polytheists were the white guys. Greece and Rome they were Europeans. The polytheistic religions were the Greco-Roman religions. They were polytheistic and cosmopolitan. Monotheism was born with the brown guys, fellows who look like us. Moses and Christ and Muhammad were all brown skinned. You see, they're Asiatics. Mahatma Gandhi went to Jaffna in 1927 and he said Muhammad and Jesus were both Asiatics, and he was absolutely right. We are Asians. This monomania arose with the Semitic religions, and the white guys were the polytheists. Now the opposite has happened. What happened? So this concept of one true religion has actually caused a lot of philosophical and political problems. There's no time to go into it now. But all I'm saying is I'm repeating my request that we should have a proper philosophical discussion about religion on the one hand, and how a capitalist system has very, very neatly fitted into religious conflict. It's absorbed it. You can't dissociate these two issues, the struggle against capitalism with the struggle against religious warfare and fascism. Thank you.
Thanks, Dilip. I would like to ask Father Cedric Prakash if he has some reactions.
Yeah, no, I really don't have any comment. But the point is, in many parts of the world and in India too, religion across the board, whether it be Christianity or Islam or Muslim, always tends to become big business. Okay, and a lot of religion is identified with um, um, with heavy structures, big buildings, big grounds, and so on. And you see what is happening. The whole question of the Waqf bill, which has come up, is basically to be able to target the Muslim community. The day after it was passed in Parliament, the organizer had a very, very, very big article which they pulled down from their website to show how the Catholic Church had more land than the Muslims in the country. So once materiality, that it was not without reason that Jesus was born in a stable and died on a cross. So materialism, as Dilip was saying, has also come out in a way with the white skin, with the Romans, not with the Asians. That materiality in religion. So unless we change that mindset and dissociate religion with economics, it's powerful. You see now, for example, the white American Catholics of United States, the right wing, hated Pope Francis because he linked global warming, climate change in his Laudato Si with consumerism, with becoming richer. And there is even among Christians the gospel of prosperity, which goes against the very tenets of the Christian faith. Now, I think we need to look at it, as Dilip was saying, in a more impassioned way. I think we need to have, I mean, while it's good to have this webinar and so on, I think some of us must meet physically to thrash this out and to get people from across the board, from different parts of society, to be able to look in a more dispassionate, in a more objective, impartial way of how, people also use religion to manipulate people. Marx said, which I said in my presentation earlier, Marx very carefully used, religion as the opium of the people. And there are religions across the board. There are peddlers of religion who effectively use religion to manipulate minds and lives of people across the board. Yeah, I rest my case.
Thank you very much. And I would like to ask Dr. Faizi also to say something on what has been discussed.
Actually, fascism, authoritarianism, and corporate business, they go together. They reinforce each other. In Italy, Mussolini's system was a government and corporates working together. During emergency, Indira Gandhi's emergency, many of the Western countries were in support. Margaret Thatcher came all the way to support Indira Gandhi personally, because it's for them, it's so easy to do business with, to use our country as a market and also to take the resources out on terms that they dictate. And now we are in the super emergency. The Western corporates are very happy, although some political corners, they occasionally do raise a protest and opposition. They are generally the corporate system, and their mentors are always happy. And within the country itself, it is a political fascism working very closely with the corporates, to the extent that we begin to suspect whether the country is being run for these few corporates. And the tragedy is that nexus is not being challenged. Is in a way that can actually break that nexus and overcome fascism itself. That's a big challenge.
Thank you very much.
I just want to, in case I am misunderstood, I'm not saying all people of faith or spiritual people or all people of religion is equated to business, to economy, and so on. There are definitely across the religions, Hindus and Muslims and Christians, who are genuinely adherents of their faith, who live a very simple life, and are, and don't mix religion, with either consumerism or materialism or with the economy. I just want to put what I said in perspective, because apparently somebody has misunderstood me in the chat box.
No, thanks for the clarification. And I would also like to clarify that one of the, just to give a background to this theme that we have for the webinar, is a recent kind of debate that took place within the Communist Party of India Marxists in Kerala at their recent party congress on whether communists are allowed to be religious. Because, and one of their leaders clarified, saying that joining the Communist Party doesn't mean that you can't be religious, because it takes, and you don't become communist just by joining the Communist Party, implying that as you go along, you actually stop being religious. But the question is whether it is possible to reclaim religion, going from its reality in some ways as being these big structures, very profit-driven, not profit-driven, and also totally enmeshed in politics of manipulating resources, people, and so on and so forth, to the religion of, as you said, Father Cedric, that there are people who can be religious without being manipulated. People can be religious without being big religion. So I think one needs to distinguish between the big and the small. Just as in business, there's big business, there's medium-sized business, there's small business, and not all of them are the same. I would not apply the term capitalism to the corner store selling groceries. I would apply it to the big corporations. So one has to distinguish between different kinds of scales of business. Scale makes a big difference also in these matters. At this stage, I would like to open up the floor for just a few questions. We have actually overshot our time, but since it's a Sunday evening, we can take some questions if anybody has Any questions? Please raise your hand, and a question, if possible, not a comment as much as a question. Anybody has any doubts, questions to the panelists? I don't see any questions. This is truly a divine webinar. So, with that, any last comments, Dilip?
There is an important question there. Somebody has posted an important question. Please check.
If they can actually.
What's the
spell it.
question?
What's the question?
It says, I don't know who the sender is. It says UB, but it says my question. Who is the owner of my body?
Well, it depends who employs you.
Complex question, I would say. I think it's worth at least the speakers must give some response.
Only question that arises is the notion of ownership. Ownership itself is a kind of relation. It's a human relation amongst human beings. When we say property, property is not an object. It's a relation between human beings and other human beings or an object. So the owner of my body the question is imposing a concept of proprietorship over life. It's a body. A body is a repository of life. If there's no life in the body, then we are in the ground, or we are ashes and dust and mud. The only reason we are able to even speak a question like this is because we have life in us. So the question is not who is the owner of my body, but the question is who is the owner of my life. Now, the owner of my life, that's a very complex issue, but in the capitalist order, increasingly human life is subordinated to the need for production of capital, the production of profit. So human life and human need doesn't get ratified unless it is backed up by money. I may need food, I may need oxygen for meningitis, I may need good medicines, I may need to go somewhere. Nothing counts unless it is backed by cash. So the simple answer is, under capitalist system, various kinds of rank ordering of human beings, but under the capitalist system, increasingly human beings come under the control and ownership, if you like, of capital. Not capitalists as persons, but capital. Which is why, sorry.
But the questioner has also added a corollary, their own answer. It says, my answer is my government. Because if somebody kills me, then why government is dash, dash, dash. In other words, why is the government concerned if they kill me? So in other words, they're interested in body and they.
Yeah, I think.
I have a question for Professor Dilip. May I?
Please,
Okay,
please.
just a quick question. I really liked your talk, and you made the statement, which I agree with, that religion has been replaced with ideology. Okay, and I am seeing this and experiencing this in a very big way in all my circles of friends and family and whatever. And my question to you is, why is it that highly intelligent, well-placed people in life are open to this, I would say, slavishness almost to ideology? They are moving away from religion into this ideology. So what is it that is appealing to them that they are getting so hooked? As you rightly said, you cannot have a discussion, it always becomes emotional. So can you throw some light on that? Why is it so appealing, these ideologies? I can understand why religion is appealing, but now I'm asking, why are they shifting from religion to ideology and finding it so appealing?
The human mind has a yearning for simplification. Even the most intelligent people actually try to simplify things. One of the most famous simplifiers was Einstein. So he wrote a lot of mathematical equations which neither you or I can understand, but he arrived at some very simple understanding. But then he understood that even if you want simplification, there's no royal road. You have to go through the complexity. People, by and large, do not like complexity. So my simple answer to you would be that ideology gives people the illusion of understanding more than they know. It gives you a simplified answer to questions which are actually very complex and which do not lend themselves to oversimplified answers. So I were to respond to a student, I would say, like the dating application say it's complicated. I would say it's complicated, but nobody likes to hear that. They prefer to get a simple answer, you know. Now, when you get a simple answer, you start with one simple proposition, which is just an assertion. Truth is not an assertion. Truth has to come out of a dialogue. But people make assertions and they mistake the assertion for being the truth. And then they refuse to discuss any further. Then everything follows from that. You can make an assertion. It's like the mad guy who's going around snapping his fingers. Then you ask him, why are you snapping your fingers? He says to keep the pink elephants away. So you say, where are the pink elephants? You say, see, it's working. There are no pink elephants. So this is the way ideology works. It starts off with a simple proposition, which is unproven, which is just an assertion that all Muslims are bad or all Jews are bad or whatever. It's like Trump's mind. Now, Trump is actually strutting over the whole world. He's a complete moronic character. He can't speak a sentence, grammatical sentence in his own language. But he's ruling the scenario. So that's an explanation. Millions of people don't want to think. We are mistaken if we believe people are open to conversation. Most of the time, people have made millions on the basis of, as I said, debate TV, where they're only shouting. Why would you want to waste your time listening to people shout? No one is listening to anyone, but they do it and they make money. So that's what my straight answer is the desire for simplification in a very complex world.
Any other questions? Or should
Okay.
we call it a night?
I think I have to leave, Satya, because I have a engagement just now.
Thanks.
So
I think I'll hand it over to Binu to a quick vote of thanks. Thank you everyone for being here.
thank you all very much. It was a very good opportunity meeting all of you. I hope that we meet again and we carry on this discussion. Thank you.
Binu, over to you.
Thank you all for attending this webinar. It's been an excellent, thought-provoking session. Various angles of religion, spirituality, and fascism were discussed. And this it was so enriching for all the participants. So we should thank our panelists, Father Cedric, Prakash, Dr. Faizi, and Professor Dilip Simeon. And I would like to thank the panelists and all those who came here to attend this webinar. We will be having a webinar soon, next month, on this KPCC Memorial Series. I hope you all will join that seminar also. Thank you all.